The year I turned 15, a Taoist priest passing by the Marquis's residence cast a fortune for me, saying that intelligence invites early ruin, and that I would need some disability to survive. True to his words, shortly after the priest left, I began to suffer one illness and mishap after another. It wasn't until I was pushed off a rockery by my stepsister Xinyan, born of my stepmother, and became lame as a result, that everything finally calmed down. My stepmother and Xinyan posed as my saviors, demanding that I be eternally grateful to them. Xinyan even took my mother's dowry and married into the Duke of Xinguo's mansion in my place. Meanwhile, at my father's urging, instigated by my stepmother, I was sent to a nunnery outside the city, destined to spend my days with oil lamps and ancient Buddhas. But Xinyan still refused to let me go. It wasn't until the day she strangled me to death that I realized everything had been my stepmother's conspiracy. When I opened my eyes again, I had been reborn on the day Xinyan pushed me off the rockery. Just as her hand was about to touch me, I dodged with a swift move, and she ended up falling off the rockery herself. This time, it was she who became disabled. Watching my stepmother loudly scolding the imperial physicians, ordering them to cure Xinyan at all costs, a cold smirk curled at the corner of my lips. Xinyan's foot could not be healed, because in my past life, I was pushed from that very spot by her. And I became a cripple ever since. Sure enough, the more the imperial physician felt her pulse, the deeper his frown became. After carefully examining Xinyan's foot, he finally clasped his hands and told her father that he could do nothing more, then took his leave. Hearing this, Xinyan was utterly terrified and cried out loudly to her stepmother, "Mother, I don't want to be a cripple, I don't want to be a cripple." Heartbroken, the stepmother pulled Xinyan into her arms and comforted her. "Don't be afraid. Mother will surely find someone to heal you. It is not your fate to be disabled, someone else is meant to be disabled." I was so angry I laughed. Peering out, I met the vicious glare of my stepmother, Li Fengran. What does mother mean by that? Is she saying that I should have been the one to fall off the rockery? Li Fengran, already unsettled by Xinyan's leg injury, dropped her usual pretense of grace and composure. At my retort, she immediately jumped up and cursed. "Am I wrong? That Taoist said you were too clever and prone to an early death, that you needed a disability to survive. So the one who should be crippled is you." Everything before me seemed to overlap with the previous life. In my past life, after I said that Xinyan pushed me off the rockery and caused my disability, my stepmother also pointed at my nose and scolded me with the same righteous indignation, telling me it was all fate. It was all because of that damned sorcerer's fortune-telling that everything became fate, turned into Xinyan's kind act of saving my life. Upon hearing this, my father no longer pursued Xinyan's fault. Instead, he agreed to my stepmother's proposal to have Xinyan marry into the Duke of Xinguo's mansion in my place. As for me, they sent me to a nunnery, to live a life of solitude before the Buddha. What nonsense fate, what nonsense fortune-telling. The love it was Li Fengran's scheme to seize the dowry my mother left me and my engagement. Unfortunately, I only learned the truth on the day of my tragic death. Fortunately, the heavens gave me another chance. Now it is Xinyan who has become disabled. Too, what mother said does make some sense. But the Taoist said that I can only survive by being disabled, never said that my sister would never become disabled in this lifetime. Li Fengran was left speechless, her face turning extremely ugly. Because no one could criticize what I said, no matter where it was heard. After all, what does my disability have to do with anyone else? Moreover, the current emperor venerates Buddhism and Taoism, yet my mother insists on entering the Taoist path, blindly following every word of that charlatan. If outsiders were to find out, who knows if they might impeach my father, the father who had just been about to speak in her defense immediately withdrew his foot and glared sternly at his stepmother. This had touched a nerve. His greatest concerns in life were his official career and his heir. From now on, do not speak of Romer being too clever and thus doomed to an early death. It's all nonsense. But the stepmother argued back, if that Taoist's words were false, then why has Romer been plagued by so many misfortunes lately? Moreover, if it weren't for Romer, how would Yenner have fallen off the rockery? Xinyan also cried out in agreement, "That's right, Father. If it weren't for big sister stepping aside, she would have been the one to fall. I suffered this undeserved calamity in her place." The stepmother's eyes darted around as she said, "Master, Yenner has endured such great suffering for Romer this time. Romer must compensate her properly." I let out a cold laugh. Oh, and how does mother wish for me to compensate her? Before Li Fangren could speak, Xinyan couldn't help but blurt out, "Let me marry brother Bai, and give me all your dowry." The stepmother, crying pitifully with tears streaming down her face, threw herself into my father's arms. "Master, with Yinjia's leg in this condition, her marriage prospects will be difficult. On the other hand, Rongjie, with her talent and beauty, is sure to find a better match." With a beauty in his arms, my father's resolve softened again, and he was on the verge of agreeing. However, that betrothal and dowry were left to me by my mother. No one else has the right to dispose of them. What an appetite you have. Aren't you afraid of choking? Not to mention whether the Duke of Jinggua's mansion would even look twice at a cripple like you. But as for my mother's dowry, you're asking father to risk losing the iron certificate of immunity and be cursed behind his back for generations to come. In the current dynasty, only those from fallen families would use their daughter-in-law's dowry, otherwise it was always reserved for their own children. Father shuddered, no longer caring about the beauty or lack thereof. With a forceful shove, Li Fangren crashed heavily to the ground. Enough. Let this matter end here. Find a few more imperial physicians to examine Sister Yin. If she truly cannot be cured, I will make my own arrangements for her marriage. With that, father cast no further glance at the mother and daughter, flicked his sleeves, and strode away. I followed behind him, leisurely leaving Xinyan's courtyard. I didn't tell my father that Xinyan had brought disaster upon herself by trying to push me. After all, the entire Marquis' residence was now under my stepmother's control, and no one would risk offending her to testify on my behalf. Moreover, this time Xinyan had become the victim. Victims are always easier to sympathize with. 3 That evening after bathing, I had just lain down on the bed, planning to sort through the details of my past life to see if there was anything that could help me overthrow Li Fangren and her daughter. But suddenly, I heard the sound of pebbles hitting the window outside. My heart stirred, and I hurriedly threw on my clothes, walked to the window, and pushed it open with trembling hands. Sure enough, Subai, the heir of the Duke of Jinghua, was standing outside the window, anxiously scrutinizing me. Seeing me standing there safe and sound, his naturally large peach blossom eyes grew even wider. "Romer, are you all right?" I paused, looking at him with suspicion. "That's not right. I heard that you were the one who was pushed off the rockery by that wretched girl today and ended up lame. Could I have remembered wrong?" Upon hearing this, I could no longer control my expression and looked incredulously at Subai, who was still scratching his head in confusion. He had also been reborn? Suddenly, a voice came from the servants' quarters next door, "Miss," startled. I quickly made a shush gesture to Subai. "It's nothing. I just opened the window a crack because it's too stuffy. Go back to sleep." The commotion subsided, but if Subai continued standing outside the door, he would likely be discovered. Now that the home mansion's household authority was firmly in Li Fangren's hands, even my personal maids were all her informants. If she found out, Li Fangren would surely use this to ruin my reputation. I glanced at Subai. He seemed to have rushed back right after being reborn, still a bit dazed. He was simple-minded, having spent his whole life only knowing martial arts, weapons, and military strategy. The rear chambers of the Duke of Jinggua's mansion were uncomplicated, with few troublesome matters, so he was even less aware that the schemes and intrigues within the inner court were far more perilous than those in the imperial court. If I let him go back like this, it would only ruin my plans. Maybe you should come in first." That one sentence not only made my face flush red, but the tips of Subai's ears also turned crimson. He stared at me for a long moment before finally speaking with resolve. "Romer, rest assured, in this life, I will never betray you." After saying that, he flipped in through the window in a flash. Me? What a fool. For before I could say much, Subai eagerly told me everything that happened later in the previous life. "I just came back from the battlefield, thinking I was marrying you. But when I lifted the veil, it turned out to be Xinyan. It gave me quite a fright. Father said you were fated by a Taoist priest, and with your lame leg, you were no longer fit to be the matriarch of the clan. But to me, what does it matter about being the matriarch or having a lame leg? As long as it's you, nothing else is important." Looking into Subai's sincere eyes, my eyes reddened slightly. Our mothers were close friends in their maiden days, and after marriage, Subai and I were born around the same time, growing up together as childhood sweethearts. Since I was young, I knew that the man I would marry was Subai, and he knew that the woman he would wed was me. This bond endured even after both our mothers tragically passed away. He was handsome and dashing, of high status, and utterly devoted to me. Whenever he found something delicious or fun, he would eagerly bring it to me. Even when I threw little tantrums, he wouldn't mind in the least. Instead, he would patiently coax me until I smiled again. It was precisely because he was so good that Xinyan would go so far as to kill me just to take him away. Thinking of this, I asked him in a hoarse voice what happened next, after that. I made a huge scene at home. I had just earned military merits and was in the Emperor's good graces, so my father had no choice but to agree to find a way to swap you back. But I waited and waited, and after a month and a half you still hadn't come. I went to the Shin residence, and they said you had returned to your hometown in Jiangnan to recover from your injuries. So I set off for Jiangnan to find you. At this point, he slapped his thigh hard, his face full of frustration. It's all my fault for being too foolish, letting them toy with me. After searching all over Jiangnan for you but finding nothing, I returned to the capital only to see a gravestone. Subai's eyes were bloodshot, his voice choked with emotion, as if he had returned to that desperate moment. He suddenly lifted his head and boldly took my hand. I hate it so much. The tears he had been holding back finally broke free and streamed down. No wonder Xinyan had been so eager to strangle me in the nunnery back then. It turned out that Subai had never acknowledged this marriage. They had schemed with all their might, yet underestimated a man's true heart. All their calculations were no match for genuine affection. So how did you die and come back to life? It took me a long time to find out that Xinyan strangled you with her own hands. On the day I discovered the truth, I ran her through with a sword in front of everyone at Daming Temple. But that still wouldn't warrant death. In this dynasty, men were far more leniently treated than women, and Subai had military merits to his name. He could have easily fabricated some crime, like Xinyan having an affair, and surely escaped legal punishment. Why would he go so far as to die? Subai tightened his grip on my hand again. Without you, this world holds no meaning for me. My heart began to pound uncontrollably. This fool, why is he always so clueless? Enough talk. I came to tell you to be careful of that mother and daughter. Luckily, your legs haven't been crippled by them yet. I quickly interrupted him. I'm not crippled, but Xinyan is. I've also been reborn, so I played along and let her reap what she sowed. I couldn't help it anymore and rolled my eyes. You idiot, after finally sorting everything out with Subai. He was so furious he wanted to draw his sword and kill those two mother and daughter on the spot. At worst, I'll trade in my military merits this time. I don't believe the Emperor would actually kill me over them. I quickly stopped him. But that would ruin your reputation too. I don't want to marry someone with a tarnished name. We need to live with dignity. Subai grew anxious and immediately apologized to me. Then what should we do? How about we get married right away, every moment you stay here? My heart is in my throat. I looked toward the window, where the faintest light of dawn was beginning to seep through. The sky was about to break into day, and my once dark life was now illuminated by a ray of hope, thanks to the second chance fate had given me. Don't worry. Not only will I live well in this life, but I'll also make them taste every bit of the suffering I endured in my past life. Having said that, I suddenly became very serious and told Subai, there's something I need you to do. Can you handle it? Subai immediately promised that he would get it done for me, even if it meant going through fire and water. There's no need for you to go to such great lengths. All I need you to do is treat me coldly, treat Xinyan warmly, and pretend that you like her. How can this be? Subai was greatly alarmed and shook his head repeatedly. The moment I see her face, I can't help but want to kill her. His resistance was strong, so I had to resort to my ultimate weapon, acting spoiled. So you're unwilling to help Ronger, since we were young? Subai had always gone along with whatever I wanted. Whenever I acted spoiled, he could only blush and nod in agreement. Still, he emphasized sternly, I'm just pretending, you know that. All right, it's getting late. You should head back now. Watching Subai walk away under the morning sun, turning back every few steps, I began to ponder slowly. Li Fengran was my mother's half-sister who had envied everything my mother possessed since childhood. So, without any sense of shame, she seduced her own brother-in-law and climbed into his bed. The daughter she raised also grew up fond of snatching away everything I liked, even if she didn't truly care for it. Xinyan couldn't bear to see that the outstanding Subai had eyes only for me. Nor could she stand the sight of us being deeply in love and perfectly matched. So she wanted to take him away. But if Subai no longer loved me and turned into a playboy, and if I had someone else in my heart, would she still be so fixated on marrying him? I'm really looking forward to her reaction. After several imperial physicians had examined Xinyan's leg, it was confirmed that she would be left with a disability at best. It would only be barely noticeable when she walked slowly. As a result, the fragrant courtyard had become a scene of constant commotion, with Xinyan smashing things and scolding servants every day. Until one day, an unexpected visitor suddenly arrived at the manor. Yan, what happened to your injury? It truly breaks my heart to see you like this. I arrived late and overheard Subai speaking in a clear, theatrical tone, reciting the lines we had agreed upon. Xinyan caught a glimpse of me through the crack in the door and, crying, rushed into Subai's arms, tightly wrapping her arms around his waist. Subai's body stiffened for a moment, and after taking a couple of deep breaths, he placed his hand on Xinyan's back and comforted her in a low voice. Is my little sister feeling wronged? Xinyan cried even harder. I was only trying to help my sister. Otherwise, with her constant minor and major ailments, what if she really couldn't survive, as that Taoist said, but my sister didn't appreciate it and even mistakenly thought I was trying to harm her. Instead, it's me who's been harmed. She lifted her head slightly, looking at Subai with tearful eyes. Brother Bai, I can't go on living. My leg is crippled, and now I can never marry a good man. Subai suppressed his disgust, wiped away her tears with a handkerchief, and comforted her. Don't be afraid, little sister. You are as beautiful as a celestial being. There will be plenty of people who will fall for you. Including brother. Subai stiffened his neck and nodded. Xinyan, as if just noticing me, startled and shrank into Subai's arms. Sister. When did you arrive? I let out a cold laugh, snorted, and pretended not to see the resentful look Subai shot at me, then stormed off with a dramatic flick of my sleeves. Of course, I didn't miss the smug gleam in Xinyan's eyes, as if her scheme had succeeded. Great. The hook has been cast. In the following days, Subai came to the Marquis's residence every day, even declining the victory parade. It was said that the emperor was furious about this, scolding him for being young and reckless, only caring about romantic affairs. Rumors began to spread in the residence that the heir of the Duke of Jinghua was deeply in love with the second young lady of the Marquis's household. They would admire flowers in the garden, fish by the lake, and spend every day together, utterly carefree. Meanwhile, the eldest young lady of the Marquis's household had not left her courtyard for several days. The servants speculated that she must be weeping alone in her courtyard every day. After all, the heir of the Duke of Jinghua had always treated her that way before. It wasn't until this day that the eldest young lady, Shenrong, finally emerged from her courtyard that everyone was astonished to find they had guessed wrong. Not only had she not become thin and sorrowful, but she was radiant and even more dazzlingly beautiful. He's just a man, he can definitely find someone better than him. I glanced at my legs and smiled smugly at the maids beside me. Soon, these words spread to the fragrant courtyard. I heard that day the courtyard was littered with shattered porcelain, leaving no place to even set foot. Instead of restraining myself, I brazenly went to the main courtyard and asked Li Fengran for permission to stay at Daming Temple outside the city for 2 days. Li Fengran naturally refused. She slammed the teacup onto the table and said, "The household is in troubled times. And your sister is already in such a state. Yet you still think about going out to have fun. You have no sense of sisterly affection at all. Wouldn't this reflect poorly on the eldest Mrs.'s reputation?" I smiled faintly. As for my reputation, mother need not trouble herself. After all, I believe there are still more people in this world who are not blind. The young miss has certainly grown quite glib with her tongue. But even if you care nothing for your reputation, do you not care for your life? Li Fongren sauntered over to me, her tone sinister. Young miss. The outskirts of the city are far less safe than the manor. I knew she was threatening me. Now that Xinyan was lame, the pretense between us had long been shattered. But this time I was certain she wouldn't dare to act. Mother may not be aware, but recently our great nation has triumphed over the Li Kingdom. His Majesty is overjoyed and has ordered soldiers with military merits to parade through the streets daily to proclaim our nation's might against those who have truly faced battle and killed men on the battlefield. What chance do those petty scoundrels have? Li Fongren was taken aback, seemingly surprised that I had truly changed, now even capable of thinking of such things to threaten her. Moreover, Mother may have grown too accustomed to being a marquis's wife, forgetting the death anniversary of your legitimate elder sister. But as a child, I have it etched into my bones, never daring to forget it for a single day. Li Fongren, frightened by my bloodthirsty eyes, stumbled back several steps. You. Watching her panicked expression, a thought suddenly struck me. Could Mother's death also be her doing? Li Fongren, whether it's you or not, in this lifetime you will have to pay me back for everything in one way or another, after I brought up my mother. Li Fongren naturally had no reason to stop me anymore. But I knew that both she and Xinyan wouldn't rest easy and would surely investigate my whereabouts. I lifted the carriage curtain, glanced at the coachman driving the cart and the maid beside me, and curled my lips into a mocking smile. Turn around, the maidservant asked me in panic. Miss, aren't we going to Daming Temple? Of course we are, but since it's rare to leave the mansion, let's first join in the fun. I climbed out of the carriage, excitedly watching the lively scene before me. Look, a woman exclaimed, and everyone followed her gaze to a carriage slowly approaching in the distance. What a magnificent sight! This carriage was unlike the traditional ones in our country, surrounded by white silk that fluttered in the wind, as if borne by immortals. Vaguely, one could glimpse the silhouette of a man seated within. He was as pure and noble as a snow lotus from the Tian Shan Mountains, a gentleman as refined as jade, polished and carved. In an instant, heaven and earth fell silent, until a bold woman tossed a sachet from a roadside tavern's private room, striking the carriage, and the entire street erupted into fervor once more. What a handsome gentleman! Oh my, so such beauty exists in the state of Li, don't you know? He is the third prince of Li Pei, here in the capital as a hostage. Ah, how pitiful! Soon, the women around began to feel sympathy for such a beautiful man with such a tragic fate. Women, after all, are more inclined to cherish those who are weaker. But this man was not the weakling they assumed him to be. Otherwise, he would not have stirred such great turmoil in the capital later on. I craned my neck to look around at the surrounding taverns and indeed spotted the two princesses. The fervor in their eyes seemed as if it could set heaven and earth ablaze. I turned back with a smile and asked my maid, who is equally captivated by the man before us, how does this man compare to the heir of the Jingwa Duke? The maid dared not speak directly and lowered her head. However, this gesture indicated that, in terms of appearance alone, this man was slightly superior to Su Bai. I glanced at her smugly. I heard he'll be staying temporarily at Daming Temple today too. What do you think, Misaido? I have a chance to get the moon first from my vantage point by the water. This startled the maid even more. The coachman beside her also widened his eyes, casting a somewhat surprised look at me. I'm sure these words will soon reach Li Fongren and Xinyan's ears. A celestial figure like him, would Xinyan really be willing to let him go? 9. As soon as I arrived at Daming Temple, after lighting the eternal lamp for my mother, I began wandering around the temple grounds. My maid seemed to want to say something but hesitated, torn between advising me and daring not to. I simply pretended not to notice her unease and grew even more unrestrained. Heaven helps those who help themselves, and I actually managed to encounter that person in the bamboo grove behind the mountain. He was alone, staring at the waterfall before him, lost in thought. I stepped closer, but a guard suddenly sprang out and pressed a sword against my neck. Miss, hearing the commotion, he turned back and met my calm eyes, seemingly captivated by my fearless demeanor. He curved his lips into a faint smile like a splendid scene of blooming flowers unfolding before my eyes, breathtakingly beautiful. Your Highness is indeed beautiful. He laughed even more heartily. So, miss, you came chasing all the way here? Ignoring the contemptuous look from the guard beside me, I smiled and replied, pursuing beauty is where the heart desires. What does it matter if I overstep a little? How dare you? The guard bellowed, pressing his sword 2 inches closer. I felt blood slowly trickling from my neck. The maid was so frightened she fainted on the spot. I glanced at her. Fainting would make things more convenient for me. I looked back at that person. Your Highness is now like drifting duckweed. If not me, there will naturally be someone of higher status who wants to pluck this flower of yours. By then. Can you still dodge as stubbornly as you do today? My words finally made the person before me change color. He stared at me with deep wariness, and at last he waved his hand to dismiss the guards. I strolled forward, drew closer to him, and carefully examined his face. Your Highness is truly exceptionally gifted. No wonder those who have seen you can't look away. But it seems the young lady has no such intention. I blinked my eyes. How does your Highness know? Because when you look at me, there is no affection in your eyes. But there is calculation. I covered my mouth with a light laugh. Then would your Highness be willing to be calculated by me? He also smiled. But what's in it for me? What if I said this matter could help your Highness return to your homeland and secure your great ambition? 10 Within 2 days of returning to the mansion from Daming Temple, a major piece of news broke in the capital. The reigning emperor was to select a consort for the third prince of the distant kingdom, aiming to further strengthen the friendly ties between the two warring sides. All the unmarried young ladies in the capital were in a frenzy, and even the ready-made clothing shops and jewelry stores were thrown into chaos. But soon, another piece of news spread in the capital. The third prince of the kingdom had personally entered the palace to request an invitation to the flower-viewing banquet from His Majesty. What, are you saying that in just a few days the third prince has already found someone he fancies in the capital? Which young lady is it, to have won the favor of such a figure? I heard that during his time at Daming Temple many noble ladies went there to burn incense, just to steal another glance at him. Who knows? Perhaps the two of them caught each other's eye at the temple. With a clatter, the chatter was interrupted by the teacup Xinyan had shattered. I smiled lightly as I looked over, and she was glaring at me with her lips bitten in indignation. Nonsense, the young ladies, puzzled, looked at Xinyan, who was already somewhat hysterical, and exchanged glances with each other. This was the first time we had come out to a banquet since Xinyan's leg had gone lame. But news of her leg problem had long since spread throughout the capital. When everyone thought of this, they found it inconvenient to openly criticize her rudeness. After all, if one were to encounter such a setback themselves, it would be hard for their temperament not to change. Moreover, she was so certain. Could she have some inside information? A young lady asked softly. Second miss, have you heard something? It's absolutely impossible that we locked eyes at Daming Temple, Xinyan said through gritted teeth. I gently waved the thin fan in my hand and gave her a faint smile. This only made her even angrier, and she immediately ordered her maid to help her out. She was going back to the mansion, unable to stay here a moment longer. After Xinyan left, the other young ladies curiously gathered around me, eager to inquire. Romer, what has happened to your younger sister? Do you have to put up with her temper at home too? How pitiful. We could understand if her leg injury changed her disposition, but now, like this, no good family will take a second look at her. Li Fengran, did you see that? Reputation can change in an instant. And there are plenty of clear-eyed people. 11 Within 2 days, an even more sensational event had the entire capital in an uproar. The third prince of the kingdom had given away the invitation in his hand. Which young lady do you think he gave it to? How would I know? I heard that the 5th princess and the 7th princess have been fighting tooth and nail, visiting the 3rd prince at Daming Temple every day to curry favor, just to get that invitation he personally handed out. Could it really be one of them? Not at all. I heard that yesterday. The 3rd prince left Daming Temple and went straight to all right. Stop keeping us in suspense. Which young lady is it? The man mysteriously pointed east. It's the young lady of the Yongping Marquis' mansion, Yongping Marquis Manor? But there are 2 legitimate daughters in the Yongping Marquis Manor. I wonder which one the 3rd prince personally invited. Rumors spread throughout the city, and within the Yongping Marquis Manor, things were far from peaceful. My father, ecstatic, held the invitation in his hands and paced around the room, exclaiming, "It's my daughter, haha, it's actually my daughter." Xinyan sat to the side, her eyes bulging as she glared at me with intense hatred, the handkerchief in her hands nearly torn to shreds. Meanwhile, Li Fangran sat at the head of the table, her brows tightly furrowed, lost in thought. Finally, she couldn't help but ask her father, did the third prince specify which young lady from our mansion he was inviting? Her father glanced at Xinyan's legs and said matter-of-factly, needless to say, it must be Roan. Father, Li Fangran interrupted him eagerly. You must be certain. If we get the wrong person, the consequences for our family would be severe. Besides, Sister Rong is already betrothed. Her father stood frozen in place. That's right, we can't afford to offend the Duke of Xinggua's mansion either. Don't worry, Father. Li Fangran stepped closer and took her father's arm. Perhaps the third prince has taken a liking to Sister Yan. Wouldn't that be a perfect outcome for everyone? Sister Yan, Father waved his hand repeatedly in denial. How could that be? Sister Yan is a cripple. At this, Xinyan burst into tears of anger. Father glanced awkwardly at Xinyan, then flicked his sleeves and left. Enough. I'll go ask the third prince to clarify things. As soon as Father left, Li Fangran and her daughter revealed their true nature even more. Sister Rong, remember, you are a woman with a marriage contract. If anyone finds out that you've been secretly exchanging tokens with someone else, forget about marrying Annie and you'll be drowned in a pig cage. I sat upright, completely unflustered. That marriage contract, and you make me give it to Xinyan, who wants this worthless marriage contract? I want to be a prince's consort. Xinyan pushed Li Fangran aside and screamed at me. I laughed. Just a couple of days ago, it was all brother by this, brother by that, and today, with someone better, you toss him aside like a worn-out shoe? Xinyan, you really have no shame. Xinyan was so furious she was hopping mad. Li Fangran gently patted her to calm her down. Ronger, there's no need to provoke Yenna like this. She's still young, but as her mother, I will make the best plans for her. Her eyes stared straight at me. My Yenna deserves only the best. I coldly met her gaze. If it weren't for you, I would never have lost my mother. Li Fangran, just you wait and see. 12 Naturally, Father couldn't get anything out of the third prince, only receiving some ambiguous replies, saying it wouldn't be proper to be frivolous with the young lady. After all, this was something I had discussed with him long ago to make everyone uncertain whether he truly liked me or Xinyan. That way, Li Fangran and Xinyan would mistakenly believe they still had a chance and fall into the trap wholeheartedly. Thus, time quickly arrived on the day of the flower viewing banquet. Because of the third prince's ambiguity, Li Fangran and her mother indeed became even more emboldened. Early in the morning, she used her authority over the household to order my courtyard to be completely surrounded. Whoever lets the young lady take a single step out of this courtyard today should not blame me for beating her to death and throwing her into the mass grave. Li Fangran stood outside the courtyard gate, speaking coldly. Xinyan stood beside her, dressed in a newly made pink gown, adorned with pearls and hairpins, looking radiant and dazzling. Sister, you will always be beneath me for the rest of your life, trampled under my feet. What use is it that you managed to get an invitation for yourself? In the end, it only benefits your little sister, doesn't it? I stared back at them expressionlessly. If the third prince truly had feelings for me, do you think a single banquet could change anything? Li Fangran sneered. That's none of your concern, Sister Rong. Since our Yenner can win over the heart of the Duke of Xinggua's heir, she can naturally win over the heart of the third prince as well. With that, she threatened me again. Have you ever heard the saying, the good die young? Just like your own mother. Now she didn't even bother to hide her intentions. I glared at Li Fangran. I've only heard one saying, what goes around comes around. Don't say I didn't warn you, you'll regret this. 13 I couldn't be bothered to deal with them anymore and went straight back to my room. As soon as I sat down at the table, a slender hand handed me a cup of tea, bringing it to my lips. You've said so much you must be thirsty, right? I looked up and met Subai's pitiful, peach blossom eyes, like a big dog begging its owner for a pat. I couldn't help it curved my lips into a smile. This finally brought out all of Subai's grievances. You have no idea how hard these past few days have been for me. When she feeds me, I want to throw up. When she acts coy with me, I want to throw up too. As long as I'm by her side, I feel like throwing up every single moment. Ronger, it's been so tough for me. Subai pitifully grabbed my hand. If you hadn't repeatedly stressed that I must not mess up your important plans, I really wouldn't have been able to endure it. Every day when I return to the mansion, I have to scrub myself 3 times in the bath. Rolling around in a pile of corpses for 3 days wouldn't be this disgusting. I couldn't hold it in any longer and burst into laughter. These days have truly been unfair to Subai. He has to swallow his pride every day just to cheer Xinyan up. Besides, Subai gently shook my hand, a hint of jealousy in his voice. That third prince is only a tiny bit better looking than me, he gestured with his fingers, showing a narrow gap. But his situation is dangerous, hardly a reliable match. You can't actually take a liking to him. Just this much, I teased Subai. His face flushed red, and he reluctantly spread his fingers a little wider. At most, that much. And what if I really did take a liking to him? Then I will. You will what? Subai suddenly stared at me seriously, no longer grinning, but with a sincere expression. If he truly is your happiness, I will let go. But I will stay by your side as your guard. I cannot break my vow to protect you for a lifetime. I stood frozen on the spot, tears streaming uncontrollably down my cheeks. This fool! What virtue or ability does he have that heaven would let such a person accompany me for 2 lifetimes and love me for 2 lifetimes? He is all my luck. Rest assured, if you do not betray me, I will never betray you. After spending the afternoon joking around with Subai, things finally came to a close. A shadow guard slipped in and knelt on the ground to report. Both the legs and feet of the second miss of the Shen family have been broken by the joint efforts of the 5th princess and the 7th princess. I took a deep breath. I had always heard that the 5th princess and the 7th princess, relying on the current emperor's favor, acted tyrannically and were quite cruel, but I never imagined it had come to this extent. Subai squeezed my hand and, only after my complexion had somewhat recovered, said to the shadow guard, "Tell us in detail." It turned out that in the capital, there had been an ongoing bet over whether the 3rd prince had set his sights on the eldest or the 2nd young lady of the Yongping Marquis Manor. It wasn't until Xinyan appeared at the flower viewing banquet and the 3rd prince personally helped her to her seat that the bet was finally set. Lead. How is that possible, was the question on everyone's mind. Why her? This was the resentment shared by every woman present. And if anyone was even more unwilling to accept it, it was naturally the 5th princess and the 7th princess, who had long been deeply in love with the 3rd prince. 5th sister, if I couldn't compete with you, I would have accepted it. But I absolutely refused to be outdone by a cripple. After watching the 3rd prince shower Xinyan with attentive care, the 2 princesses could no longer hold back. Taking advantage of Xinyan's trip to the restroom, they had her kidnapped and thrown to the 2 Central Asian hunting dogs owned by the 5th princess. The scene was utterly horrific. By the time everyone found Xinyan, the hound still had several of her fingers clamped in its jaws. My hands turned ice cold in an instant. Subai, however, used his hand to pass warmth to me. Don't be afraid, Ronger. She brought this upon herself. Not to mention you warned them, but considering what they did to you in the past life, and to Auntie as well, I don't find this cruel at all. I've long wished I could have them drawn and quartered. I gently shook my head. It's not that I pity her. I just think people truly shouldn't do evil or else they'll face their own retribution. After Xinyan was thrown back into the home mansion like a dead weight, Li Fangren went mad on the spot. She screamed and shouted, demanding justice, only to be slapped more than a dozen times by the old nanny beside the 5th princess. It's her own fault, lame and restless, refusing to stay put in the mansion, running around everywhere. She just happened to run into the 2 beloved dogs raised by our princess. If you want justice, are you going to seek it from the imperial family? The old nanny's veiled insults were too harsh to bear. Father's face turned red and then pale as he hurriedly begged for mercy, promising to discipline everyone in the mansion. This is entirely the fault of the Yongping home mansion. We dare not implicate the 2 princesses in any way. The old nanny proudly lifted her chin. The Marquis understands reason well. After the nanny left, my father stormed over furiously and slapped Li Fangren, who is already somewhat dazed, twice across the face. "You foolish woman, you nearly brought disaster upon the Marquis' estate." Li Fangren looked at my father with red and tearful eyes. "Master, Younger is also your legitimate daughter." "Exactly. And you yourself said she's just a daughter," my father said through gritted teeth. Li Fangren stared at him coldly, a chilling smile spreading across her face. "But you'll never have a son again." The father stood frozen on the spot, his face flushing bright red. "Vicious woman. What are you saying? So it really was you who drugged father?" I spoke up to condemn her. Li Fangren immediately stopped paying attention to father, stumbled to her feet, and suddenly charged at me. Bitch, it's all your fault. But my father, who was standing in front of me, grabbed her by the hair, slapped her hard, and asked her with a murderous look. "You venomous woman, what exactly did you mean by what you just said?" Li Fangren let out a miserable laugh for a moment, then suddenly spat a mouthful of bloody saliva at my father, spraying it all over his face. "What do I mean? Just what I said. You'll never have another child in your life. Let alone a son. Ha ha ha. You," my father pointed at her in fury, his whole body trembling with rage. Venomous woman, but I felt no sympathy for him at all. I just watched coldly as this heartless man. Back then, my mother went along with everything you wanted. When you wished to take a concubine, she was heartbroken to the point of vomiting blood, yet she still got up the next day to make arrangements for you. But you mistook a fisheye for a pearl. Father. Li Fangren didn't climb into your bed out of love for you, she only wanted this wealth and glory. The one who truly loves you is the one who grew up with you as childhood sweethearts, who personally brewed you a cooling soup in the heat and sewed winter clothes for you in the cold. But you. What did you do to the one who gave you her sincere heart? Do you still remember the true feelings of your youth? Yet in the end, it all came down to that saying, a beautiful beginning leads to a bitter end. As the last word fell, my father could no longer hold on and spat out a mouthful of blood. I watched him collapse into the chair, yet I still had no intention of letting him off easily. Otherwise, what would all my mother's suffering have meant? I clapped my hands. And soon someone threw in a man dressed as a Taoist priest. "It's you?" Father's eyes widened slightly as he looked at him. Li Fangren, on the other hand, was trembling with fear. She never expected that I had actually captured this person. "Go ahead. Tell me what you've been doing for Li Fangren all these years." The Taoist had already been taught a lesson by Subai's secret guards, and now, trembling like a leaf, he spilled everything he had done for Li Fangren over the years. When Li Fangren gave birth back then, she had quite a difficult labor. The imperial physician vaguely hinted that it might affect her ability to conceive in the future. And indeed, Li Fangren was never able to become pregnant again. First, she helped Li Fangren abort the pregnancies of some concubines in the household, then pinned all the blame on my mother. Once they were certain Li Fangren could no longer conceive, they went so far as to administer a sterility drug to my father. After that, my mother fell under my father's suspicion and developed a heart condition. They swapped her medicine for poison, and not long after, she passed away. Then came the time when he came to my home to read my fortune so he could openly cripple me and let Xinyan steal my engagement. The more my father listened, the more horrified he became. By the end, he was so enraged he could barely breathe, sobbing quietly, "Yinger. My Yinger, it was all my fault that I killed you." Yinger was my mother's maiden name when she was young. But belated affection is worth less than grass, father. I watched coldly as father ordered Li Fangren to be dragged away, knowing that now that he would never have an heir, he would surely torment Li Fangren to death. Everyone got what they deserved. Thinking of this, I cast a glance at Xinyan, who lay on the ground, bloodied and barely breathing. The suffocating feeling of her viciously strangling me with a white silk sash in my past life still seemed to linger in my throat, but now she could no longer affect me in the slightest. It can be considered a life for a life. I walked out of the hall and let out a heavy breath of stale air. A figure walked through the sunlight, bringing a warmth beside me. We exchanged a smile. After the bitterness comes the sweetness, and there is always a return of flavor. Extra chapter. Today is the day the third prince returns to the state of Li. Xinyan ultimately could not be saved, while Li Fangren was confined to a remote courtyard, subjected to brutal torture every day. It is said that she won't last much longer either. My father, disheartened, has been deteriorating day by day, coughing so severely that he cannot sleep peacefully. I hear that what he enjoys most now is holing up in his study, painting portraits of my mother in her youth. Now that the entire household is under my control, all the servants who needed replacing have been replaced, and those who remain are utterly loyal to me. So, leaving the residence whenever I wish is naturally no issue at all. The third Prince Paley was still seated in his flamboyant carriage. Seeing me approach, he lifted the white silk curtain and gave me a faint smile. Everything is indeed as Mission predicted. I curtsied to him and said with a smile. It also relied on the third prince's cooperation. But how did you manage to free me from the position of a hostage through such a trivial matter? I merely used this matter to make His Majesty understand that you are not a person who stays content. After that, naturally, someone will advise His Majesty that keeping you in the capital will only bring unrest here. But if you are allowed to return to the Lee Kingdom, the unrest will fall upon the Pei clan. Paley squinted his eyes in thought, then let out a relieved laugh. You are truly clever. He paused for a moment, then suddenly extended an invitation. I've heard you haven't been very happy here either. Would you like to visit the Lee Kingdom? It's spring all year round there, with flowers blooming everywhere. I'm sure you would love it if you went. My hand was suddenly gripped tightly by the person beside me. No need for the third prince to trouble himself. After Roner and I are married, I will naturally take her to travel across this magnificent land. Subai straightened his chest, once again resembling the imposing general he was on the battlefield. I smiled and nodded at Paley. That's right. From now on, my husband and I will surely visit Your Highness together. I hope that by then, Your Highness will have already achieved what you desire. Paley looked at me with a hint of regret, but soon he let it go. No wonder the first time I saw you, I could sense there was no affection in your eyes. It turns out you already had someone you were deeply devoted to. After Paley left, Subai turned back into the big, fawning dog by my side. Weren't you just full of fire and fury a moment ago? Wasn't that directed at outsiders? By the way, you said I'm your husband. Can we put our wedding date on the agenda now? I turned my face away, feeling my cheeks burning. Did I say that? TSK, are you going to deny it again? I spat at him. Marriage is marriage, but whether we marry or not, you still have to listen to me. Subai grinned cheekily and said, Your husband humbly obeys your esteemed orders, my lady. Laughter all the way, sunshine all the way. Mother, did you see that?